the first of two videos on revision. In this video, we're taking a first look at the revision process. Revision is an essential part of learning to write well. Becoming your own editor, though, is one of the hardest parts of writing. When you are writing, what you write makes sense to you, so it's really hard to achieve the distance from your own work to be able to view it as a reader would. So planning is important here. You must allow enough time in your writing plan to be able to leave your piece of writing aside for at least a few hours, but even better would be for a few days. If you try to revise and edit when it's too fresh in your mind, you will not see your mistakes or your confusing sentences, mainly because it made sense to you when you wrote it, and you will fill in the missing words or the punctuation without even realizing you were doing so. Before you even start the revision process, therefore, walk away from your essay or your report and take a break. Then, when you come back, look at your paper with a critical eye, as if you were grading it or reading the report as a customer. Put yourself into your reader's shoes. There are 5 basic steps to the revision process. First, you need an open mind to see room for improvement. That is, you need to acknowledge the need for revision. It doesn't matter how good at writing you are, there's always room for improvement. Second, you must read the paper all the way through to look at the big picture. Have you considered your purpose and your audience? Have you fulfilled the purpose of the task? If it's an assignment, have you met all the requirements and gone beyond the minimum requirements? At this stage, you're not looking for grammar errors. You are looking to make sure that your argument and conclusion make sense together and that the body paragraphs build your argument with supporting facts and details. At this stage, you're just reading, without writing or changing anything. Third, you read the draft again. This time, you make notations about any problems such as moving paragraphs or sentences around or rewriting them. Remember that revision is not editing. Revision is rewriting, not correcting the little things. Correcting grammar and typos is what is done in the proofreading stage. So if you're too focused on proofreading at this stage, you're not looking at the big picture. As you revise, remember to save drafts with new file names, and just in case you delete something by accident or change your mind. If you prefer to print out your essay for the revision stage, which is something that I always like to do, keep the hard copies until after the end of term. Doing so will allow you to demonstrate that you've done your own work if there is ever a question of authorship, or if something gets lost when you hand it in. The fourth step is to revise and refine while saving a new draft. Okay, remember, save it with a different name. Here you're looking critically to determine if there is anything missing or if anything needs to be clarified. Is there anything else that the audience needs to know? You are also looking to see if anything can be trimmed. Look for wordy sentences, repetitive sentences or phrases or paragraphs. While you want to ensure that all the necessary details are included, you don't want to include information that is insignificant or irrelevant. Here you are trying once again to look through the eyes of your reader, so you will still need distance from the paper or report. Finally, the fifth step is looking at that final draft. Here you're checking to make sure that one clear central idea has been maintained through the paper. Are the paragraphs organized in a logical order? Does each one relate back to the thesis statement or argument? You also want to check to see if your paragraphs are well developed and interesting. Your conclusion should flow smoothly and logically from the body to tie things up and provide a true sense of conclusion. So these are the basic steps of the revision process. But of course, there's more to think about. As you're working on the revision, think about whether or not you are trying to cover too much. Can you focus your paper more? One way that often helps is to think about your title. Every paper you write for school and every report you write for work needs to have some kind of title. Now avoid titles that are simply the name of the assignment or titles that are overly broad. A focused title sharpens the topic and suggests the approach of the writer. The title is the first signpost for the reader, indicating the direction you are taking the reader. Unfocused titles are so broad that the topics could not be covered adequately unless you're writing a book. For example, the title, The Internet in Education. is much too broad. Are you looking at education in terms of primary school, secondary school, college, university? Are you focusing on class usage or using the internet for research? I could go on. A more focused title might be Using the Internet in the Elementary Classroom. It's not a fancy title, but it does tell the reader what the essay or report will be about. Another example is the title Nutrition for the Elderly. If you are not worried about the elderly in nursing homes, which have nutritionists and dietitians planning meals, then a better title might be Nutrition for the Elderly Who Live Alone. If you do have some ideas for changing and focusing your draft, save time and effort by testing those changes on an outline rather than in the text. Play with your outline, trying to imagine the flow of your paper. Once you're happy with the revisions on your outline, then make the changes in your paper. As you're working on your revision, try to find a fresh perspective on your topic. Creativity involves taking everyday experiences and transforming it. Step back to get an offbeat view of the topic. For example, tons of people at university will write an essay on abortion. Most of those essays will be related to either laws or ethics. If you are interested in such a topic, try to approach it from a new angle. Perhaps you could focus on women at university or high school who get pregnant unexpectedly. How do they manage? What services are available to them? Or you could trace the history of abortion fights and connect that history to the changing statistics regarding teen mothers. Whatever your topic, try to look at it from alternative angles. One of the basic steps noted already is to clarify the draft. But what exactly does that mean? It is in part about looking at the big picture and making sure that you're not covering too much or too little and that you're taking that fresh look at your topic. It also means looking critically at all aspects of your essay or report. Start by looking at tone and voice. Is your written voice appropriate for the occasion, the purpose, and the audience? This means paying attention to the level of formality that is required, as well as the language you use. Does your written voice sound knowledgeable? Have you achieved the right level of technicality for your audience? Think also of the connotations of the words you use. Might the reader take offense at any of the words? Would a synonym improve the tone without changing the meaning? Not all words are neutral in meaning. In addition to the dictionary meanings of words, don't forget about the underlying meanings that can accidentally cause offense. Take a look at your openings and revise poor openings. Look at your thesis statement. Does it make sense? And say what you really mean? Does your first sentence capture attention while still being appropriate to the purpose and audience? Remember that overly philosophical or very broad openings are generally not appropriate in formal writing.